You ever have one of those moments where something just hits you, like not in a loud, dramatic way, but quietly deep in your gut? I was sitting there just thinking about everything: fame, power, the chaos of modern life, and then this one thing comes back to me: a conversation, a line, a realization that maybe we've been missing the point all along. Because, man, when you start looking around, you see it. The world's just spinning faster and faster. Everyone's chasing something: attention, validation, that next dopamine hit. And we've built this culture that glorifies excess: more followers, more noise, more of everything, but less meaning, way less soul. And then this dude, someone I've always seen as a rock, literally and metaphorically, he says something that completely flips the lens. He talked about Islam, and not in the way media likes to spin it, not politics, not division, but the essence, the moral clarity. That's what stuck with me. The idea that Islam, at its core, is about control, not control over others, but over yourself. That's what we've lost in this hyper-stimulated, always scrolling world. Self-control isn't sexy anymore, but it's the foundation of peace, and he admired that deeply. He said, you look at these people, they have discipline. They know when to stop. They know when to pray. They know when to humble themselves. And that, dude, that's powerful. Because in the West, humility is almost treated like weakness. Everyone's got an ego. Everyone's trying to prove something. But Islam centers around submission, not in a weak way, in a freeing way. Submitting to something greater than your impulses, your hunger, your pride. That's strength. And hearing him say that, knowing what kind of man he was, the discipline, the mindset, it hit different. He wasn't just talking about religion. He was talking about balance. You know what I mean? There's this wild paradox in life. The strongest people are often the most centered. The most powerful people are usually the calmest. That's the kind of thing he was pointing to. That Islam teaches self-control not as repression, but as harmony. Like, if you can control yourself, you can master your world. And that's something we've completely lost touch with. You see people online now addicted to outrage, scrolling for conflict, living in emotional chaos. Everyone's reacting. Say no to yourself. That's the ultimate flex. Not the car, not the mansion, not the status. Self-mastery, that's the real deal. And that's what modern culture doesn't get. We've got so much freedom that we've forgotten what to do with it. People mistake indulgence for happiness. You can eat whatever, watch whatever, do whatever, but you still feel hollow. Because freedom without direction is chaos. You need some kind of anchor, man, something that keeps you from drifting into the storm. And that's what I think he saw. Islam isn't about restriction, it's about order. It's about setting your compass north when everything else is spinning. He said something that stuck with me, like, you can tell a lot about a person by what they submit to. And that hit. Because in today's world, people are submitting to their phones, to their habits, to their insecurities, and they don't even realize it. But in Islam, you consciously submit to something higher, to God, to purpose, to truth. It's not weakness, it's wisdom. It's the kind of thing that makes you pause, take a breath, and remember that you're not the center of the universe. And that kind of humility, man, we need more of that. You ever notice how the people who truly have peace in their eyes, not fake smiles, not influence or peace, real peace. They live simple, disciplined lives. They pray, they give thanks, they practice gratitude, and they're not chasing trends or validation. That's moral clarity. That's knowing what actually matters. It's wild that we call it old-fashioned when it might be the most evolved mindset there is. And here's the thing. He wasn't judging anyone. He wasn't saying one culture's better than another. He was just observing, like, look at the mess we're in. Anxiety, depression, moral confusion, identity crisis. We have everything: technology, comfort, choice, but no meaning. And he's like, maybe the answer isn't more innovation. Maybe it's more faith. That takes guts to say, especially when you're on top of the world. To admit that success isn't fulfillment, that maybe peace isn't found in the spotlight, but in surrender. That word surrender, it gets a bad rap. But man, think about it. When you stop fighting everything, the world, your ego, your cravings, that's when you actually start living. That's what Islam means. Literally, peace through submission. It's not about giving up. It's about aligning yourself. It's like jujitsu for the soul. Use control, not chaos. Flow with the truth instead of fighting it. And honestly, that's what blew me away about what he said, because this wasn't some scholar or preacher. This was a guy who lived in the chaos, who knew what fame does to your head. And right before the end, he's talking about this, about moral clarity, about truth, about Islam, like he'd finally seen through the illusion. That's why it hit people so hard. It wasn't just a statement. It was a confession, a moment of raw honesty in a world that doesn't do that anymore. Man, the more you think about it, the more you realize how rare that kind of awareness is. Most people never reach that point. They get trapped in the noise. The fame, the validation, the constant feed of "look at me," but he saw through it. He talked about how everything in modern culture is built on ego, self-promotion, self-image, self-everything. And then he pointed to Islam and said, that's different. That's about removing the ego. You don't hear that often from people at the top, because when you've built your whole life on being admired, to admit that admiration means nothing, that's next level awareness. He said something like, you can have all the power in the world, but if you can't control your desires, you're still a slave. And that's the kind of line that just burns into your head. Because it's true, you see it everywhere. People with success, money, luxury, but they're not free. They're chained to their addiction, their image, their next hit of attention. But Islam teaches something radical. Control your nafs, your lower self. It's not about the world serving you, it's about you serving purpose. And that's what respect means in that context. It's not just about manners, it's about recognizing value in others, in creation, in truth itself. He talked about how the discipline of Islam, the prayers, the fasting, the humility, it's not for show, it's training, it's spiritual conditioning. Like, think of it like the gym for your soul. Every prayer is a rep, every fast is endurance, every act of kindness is recovery. You build character the same way you build muscle, through consistency and resistance, and that's what fascinated him. Because in a world that wants instant results, Islam still honors process. You can feel the respect in his voice when he said it. It wasn't some surface-level compliment. It was like he finally got it. He'd been around every type of person, billionaires, politicians, celebrities, and yet the people who seemed the most at peace were often those who had the least. They had faith, they had structure, they weren't lost in themselves. And that contrast made him question everything. Like, why do we think freedom means chaos? Why do we run from discipline when discipline is what actually frees you? And you know how Joe Rogan would say it. It's not about religion being cool or trendy. It's about truth. It's about asking, what works? Like, really, what system keeps you grounded, centered, decent? Because look around. Without that structure, everything collapses. Families, communities, even identity. He saw that, and he wasn't afraid to say, maybe this faith, the one people misunderstand, maybe it's the one that still got it right. And dude, that's what shocked people. Because when someone like that, with his influence, his reach, says something like that, it's not for attention. He doesn't need it. It comes from reflection. It comes from a man who's seen everything, done everything, and still feels that hunger for truth. He admired the way Islam respects reality, not fantasy, not emotion, reality. There's no sugarcoating, no my truth nonsense. It's just, this is right, this is wrong, this is discipline, this is chaos. And in a world drowning in gray areas, that kind of clarity feels like oxygen. You could almost hear the silence when he said it. That pause where everyone listening realized, he's serious. This isn't some PR stunt or quote. This is a man facing mortality, talking about moral clarity, and that phrase, moral clarity, that's what stayed with me. Because it's what we've lost the most. We've replaced morality with convenience. We like a mountain, unchanged, firm, focused, still teaching the same values that modern culture keeps losing: self-control, respect, truth. And that's not a coincidence. It's structure. It's purpose. It's a way of life that doesn't bend to trends or politics. He saw that, that's what moved him. He said, you can mock faith, you can call it old-fashioned, but when everything collapses, when your systems, your tech, your governments fail, people don't run to algorithms, they run to God. That's heavy, man, because he's right. When things fall apart, people don't want theories, they want truth. They want something that tells them what's right and what's wrong, not what's trending. And that's what Islam offers. Moral clarity. It's not up for debate, it's not based on feelings, it's rooted in discipline, in respect, in submission to something greater. And that's the kind of clarity that could save us from ourselves. You could see how much it affected him, that peace that comes when you realize life's not about controlling everything, it's about surrendering to what's real. He wasn't talking like a preacher, he was talking like a man who'd finally stopped pretending, like he'd found a truth bigger than fame, bigger than money, bigger than himself. And when someone like that speaks, someone who's lived on the mountaintop, you listen. because he's not chasing anything anymore. He's just telling you what's real. That's why his words shook people, because deep down, everyone knows it's true. We've traded moral clarity for moral confusion. We've turned humility into weakness and pride into power. We've made everything about me, my truth, my rights, my image. But he was saying, it's not about you. That's the message. That's the shift. When you realize life's about alignment, not indulgence, that's when you find peace. That's when you stop fighting the current. And man, I keep thinking about that, the timing, the tone, the honesty. He didn't owe the world anything, but he still said it. Maybe that was his final act of service, reminding us that strength without direction is just chaos. That maybe the real heroes aren't the loudest voices or the biggest stars. Maybe they're the ones who live with discipline, with respect, with truth. Maybe that's what we need now more than ever, a return to moral clarity, a return to something real. He said it so simply it almost felt ancient. Control yourself, respect truth, seek peace. That's not religion, that's survival, and maybe that's what he saw before he left, that all the noise we call progress doesn't mean anything if we lose our center. Maybe that's why it hit so deep, because it wasn't just a prediction, it was a mirror. He was holding it up to all of us saying, look, this is what's missing. And maybe, just maybe, he was right.